Hey everyone! In this video, we are finally tackling the secret medieval poet crossword clue, and trust me, you don't want to miss how this ends. Quick roll call before we dive in. Drop a comment with your city and what time you're watching. If you're ready for the adventure, hit that like button, subscribe to join the family, and let's get started. It begins with a grid of black and white squares. You are sitting there, maybe it's a lazy Sunday morning, the coffee is steaming, and you are breezing through the easy answers. 4 letters, bird's home. Nest, easy. 5 letters, actor pit. Brad, done. But then you hit the snag. A long one sprawling across the center of the puzzle. The clue reads simply, the secret medieval poet. You pause, you think of Chaucer. No, doesn't fit. Dante, too Italian. The answer often found in these puzzles is usually something frustratingly vague like anonymous. But in reality, that word, anonymous, isn't just a placeholder. It is the single greatest cold case in the history of English literature. It is a mystery that involves a burning library, a frantic rescue operation, a strange dialect spoken in the mud and rain of the English countryside, and a genius writer who vanished without leaving a single trace of his name. Today, we are going to solve that clue for real. We aren't just filling in boxes. We are traveling back to the year 1731 to find out why this poet is a secret in the first place. Because the truth is, we almost lost him entirely. The story of this secret poet doesn't start with a pen hitting paper, it starts with fire. Picture London, October 23, 1731. It is a cold night. We are at Ashburnham House in Westminster. Inside this building resides one of the most priceless collections of manuscripts in the world, gathered by a man named Sir Robert Cotton. These aren't just books, they are the only surviving copies of histories, sagas, and laws that define the British nation. But on this night the air smells of smoke. A fire breaks out, likely from a fireplace left unattended or a stray ember. The flames move fast, eating through the dry timber of the house, racing toward the library. Panic ensues. The librarian and a few brave souls rush into the burning building. They aren't grabbing gold or paintings, they are grabbing bundles of old parchment. The heat is intense. The smoke is blinding. In a desperate attempt to save the collection, they start throwing armfuls of manuscripts out of the windows into the yard below. Some of these books are singed. Others are charred black at the edges. One manuscript, the only existing copy of the poem Beowulf, is tossed out, scorched but safe. But amidst this chaos, there is one small, unassuming book that lands in the safety of the cool night air. It doesn't look like much. It is small, about the size of a modern paperback, bound in humble materials. It has no gold leaf, no flashy illustrations on the cover. If you opened it, the handwriting would look cramped and difficult, written in a strange, spiky script. This book is cataloged as Cotton Nero A. X, that sounds like a robot's name, but in the weird filing system of the Cotton Library, books were named after the Roman emperor whose bust sat on the shelf above them. This book sat under the bust of Nero on the top shelf, the 10th book down. Hence, Nero AX when the smoke cleared and the books were gathered up. No one really paid much attention to Nero AX. It sat in the archives, silent and unread, for years. Scholars were obsessed with other things, but locked inside that small, fire-surviving book were 4 poems. Just 4, and one of them, titled Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, would turn out to be a masterpiece that rivals anything Shakespeare or Chaucer ever wrote. This is where the mystery of our secret medieval poet deepens. You see, when we find a masterpiece, think of the Mona Lisa or Hamlet, we usually know who made it. We have biographies, letters, tax records. We know what they ate for breakfast and who they hated. But for the author of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, we have absolutely nothing. Zero, zilch. The manuscript itself is our only clue, and it is a baffling one. Let's open it up, metaphorically speaking. The first thing that hits you is the language. It isn't the polite, courtly English of London that Chaucer was using at the same time. If Chaucer is the polished diplomat sipping wine in the capital, our secret poet is the rugged genius sitting in a drafty hall in the middle of nowhere. The dialect is thick, rich, and strange. It comes from the West Midlands, Cheshire, or Staffordshire, a place that in the 1300s was considered a cultural backwater by the elites in London. It was wild country, full of dark forests and bleak moors. Yet, this poet, whoever he was, wasn't some uneducated hermit. As scholars began to translate and decode the handwriting in the 19th and 20th centuries, they realized something shocking. This backwater writer knew everything. He knew the intricate terminology of hunting. He knew the precise architectural terms for castle building. He knew the legal jargon of the royal courts. He referenced the Bible with the ease of a theologian. He described the cutting of a deer carcass with the precision of a master butcher, and the shimmer of a lady's silk dress with the eye of a fashion expert. How? How does one person know all of this? And how does someone with this level of genius write 4 distinct poems, covering romance, tragedy, religious purity, and epic adventure, and not sign his name to a single one? This is the secret in our crossword clue. In the Middle Ages, authorship was different. You didn't write to get famous. You wrote to glorify God or to entertain a patron. But even by medieval standards, this silence is deafening. We call him the Pearl Poet or the Gawain Poet today, simply naming him after his works, but it feels inadequate. It feels like calling Da Vinci the paint guy. The manuscript Cotton Nero AX is also strange because of its illustrations. There are a few pictures included, but they are terrible. They are crudely drawn, likely by someone other than the poet, perhaps a later scribe who wasn't very talented. They look like rushed doodles compared to the intricate beauty of the text itself. This suggests that the manuscript we have isn't the original author's copy. It's a copy of a copy, written down by a scribe who might not have even understood the genius of what he was copying. So, we are left with a ghost. We have a voice that speaks to us across 600 years, surviving a literal trial by fire, telling us a story about a green knight who gets his head chopped off and picks it up again. It is a story about honor, temptation, and the fear of death. It is so human, so real, that you feel like the author is sitting right next to you. But when you turn to look at him, the chair is empty. To solve this crossword clue, to really understand who this secret medieval poet was, we have to play detective. We have to profile him. We have to look at the clues he left in the text, not the name he didn't sign, but the fingerprints he left on the ideas. We need to look at who was living in the West Midlands in the late 1300s. Who had the money to commission such a book? Who had the education to write it? Was it a monk, a bored aristocrat, a lawyer with a hidden passion for fantasy? As we peel back the layers of this mystery, we are going to find that the list of suspects includes some of the most powerful people in medieval England. We might even find a connection to the king himself. But before we get to the suspects, we have to understand the crime scene, or rather, the masterpiece itself. Because to know the poet, you have to survive his game. And the game he plays in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a psychological thriller that would make a modern movie director jealous. The manuscript survived the fire of 1731, but can the poet's identity survive our investigation? We have the book, we have the location, we have the time period. Now we need to find the man. Let's dive back into the mystery. We have our crime scene, the burnt library, and our evidence. The manuscript Cotton Nero AX, but to catch our secret poet, we have to understand his mind. And the best way to do that is to look at the game he plays with us in his most famous story, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This isn't just a fairy tale. It is a psychological map of the author. Imagine the scene. It's Christmas at Camelot. King Arthur is young, energetic, and a bit reckless. He refuses to eat dinner until he sees something amazing, a wonder, a marvel. The court is famous, rich, and bored. Suddenly, the doors blow open. A giant rides into the hall, and I mean a giant. But he isn't a troll or a beast. He is a handsome, incredibly strong knight dressed in the finest clothes. But there's a catch. He is green. His skin is green, his hair is green, his horse is green. He holds a massive axe in one hand and a holly bob, a branch, in the other. This is our poet's first clue. He loves contrast. He mixes the terrifying with the civilized. The Green Knight mocks Arthur's court. He says he hasn't come for war. If he had, he'd have brought a helmet and shield. Instead, he proposes a game. A Christmas game. Someone can take his axe and give him one free swing to the neck. But in exchange, that person must find the Green Knight in exactly 1 year and 1 day to receive the same blow in return. It's a suicide mission. Silence falls over the hall. Finally, Arthur's nephew, Sir Gawain, steps up. He is the ultimate polite guy, the humble hero. He takes the axe, swings it, and chop. The Green Knight's head rolls across the floor. The knights kick it away as it rolls past their feet. Blood spurts over the green silk tunic. Job done? No. The Green Knight's body stands up. It walks over, picks up its own head by the hair, and climbs back onto the horse. The head turns to Gawain, the eyelids open, and the mouth speaks, "Meet me at the Green Chapel in a year." And he rides out. This is where the secret poet separates himself from everyone else writing in 1300s England. Most writers of that time were retelling French romances, stories about love, flowers, and gentle tournaments. Our poet writes a horror movie. He writes about magic that feels dangerous and old. But the real investigation begins when Gawain leaves Camelot. This is where the poet accidentally doxed himself. He describes Gawain's journey from the safety of the south into the wild, north of Wales and England. He lists specific places: the Anglesey Islands, the Holy Head, and the wilderness of the Wirral. In the 14th century, the Wirral, a peninsula in northwest England, was a lawless place. It was a dense forest notorious for outlaws and murderers. There was an old saying that if you lived in the Wirral, you were either a master forester or a criminal. The poet knows this place. He describes the bitter cold, the sleet that freezes on Gawain's armor, the sharp rocks, and the lonely forests where wild men live. This gives us a geographic profile. Our secret poet wasn't sitting in a warm library in London or Oxford. He was a northerner. He lived in the harsh, wet landscapes of the West Midlands. He knew what it felt like to sleep in rusty armor while sleet hit your face. He knew the geography of the borderlands between England and Wales. And then there are the bedroom scenes and the hunt. When Gawain finally finds a castle to rest in before his doom, the host of the castle proposes another game. "Whatever I hunt in the woods, I give to you. Whatever you win inside the castle, you give to me." While the host goes out hunting, his wife tries to seduce Gawain. This is a trap. If Gawain sleeps with her, he sins. If he is rude to her, he breaks the knightly code of courtesy. He is trapped in a social nightmare. Meanwhile, outside, the poet describes the hunt. And this is where scholars drop their jaws. The poet doesn't just say, "They hunted a deer." He describes the specific horn calls used to signal the dogs. He describes exactly which dogs are used for which prey: greyhounds for speed, rakes for scent. He describes the butchery, the breaking of the deer, in gruesome technical detail. He explains how to remove the bowels, how to cut the fat, which parts are for the crows and which parts are for the lords. Why does this matter? Because monks didn't know this. Peasants didn't know this. Only the aristocracy or the highly trained professionals who served them knew this. This tells us our secret poet was a courtier. He lived in a household wealthy enough to maintain a massive hunting pack. He wasn't an outsider looking in. He was an insider looking out. But wait, there's more in the manuscript than just Gawain. Remember, Cotton Nero AX contains 4 poems. The first one in the book is called Pearl. If Gawain is an adventure, Pearl is a tear-jerker. It's a dream vision where a father, grieving the loss of his precious Pearl, his young daughter who died before she was 2 years old, falls asleep on her grave. He wakes up in a dream paradise and sees her across a river. But she isn't a baby anymore. She is a queen in heaven, grown up and wise. The theology in Pearl is incredibly complex. The poet engages in deep, difficult debates about grace and salvation. He knows the Bible inside and out. He knows the Latin Vulgate. He's arguing about whether a baby, who never did any good works, deserves the same reward in heaven as a man who worked hard all his life. The answer he gives is a beautiful yes. So, let's update our profile. The suspect. Origin, West Midlands, likely Cheshire or Staffordshire, based on his dialect and geography. Social status, high. He knows castle architecture, high-end fashion, and the technicalities of aristocratic hunting. Education, elite. He is fluent in French and Latin, knows the Bible intimately, and understands complex theology. Personality, he is a moralist but deeply human. He understands the fear of death, Gawain, and the pain of grief, Pearl. He has a sense of humor, but it's dark. He is a contemporary of Geoffrey Chaucer, the father of English literature. But while Chaucer was writing the Canterbury Tales in the rhyming style of London, which became modern English, our secret poet was doing something totally different. He was part of the alliterative revival. He didn't use rhymes at the end of lines. He used the old, rhythmic, drumbeat style of the Anglo-Saxons, e.g., great God in his glory. He was a conservative rebel. He was looking backward to the old English traditions while Chaucer was looking forward to the European style. And maybe that's why he remained anonymous. He wasn't playing the London fame game. He was writing for a specific, tight-knit circle of nobles in the countryside. So, who was he? We have the profile. Now we need a name. Historians have spent centuries scouring tax rolls, estate records, and legal documents from the 1300s looking for a man who fits this description. And believe it or not, they found a few names. In the next part, we are going to name the prime suspects. We are going to look at a shadowy figure named John Massey, a knight who lived right in the middle of the poet's dialect region. We'll look at a connection to King Richard II, the boy king, whose chaotic reign might have inspired the entire story. The net is tightening. We are moving from the clues in the book to the men in the history books. We are now deep in the investigation. We have the book, the profile, and the location. Now, we need a name to fill in that crossword puzzle. For centuries, scholars have been scouring the dusty rolls of history, tax records, court proceedings, wills, looking for a man in the West Midlands who fits our profile. Educated, wealthy, devout, and a genius poet. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack, except the haystack burned down 600 years ago. But a few names have risen to the top of the suspect list. Let's bring in our prime suspect, John Massey of Cotton. This isn't just a random guess. John Massey lived in Cheshire, exactly where the dialect places our poet. He was active right around the late 1300s. He was a member of the landed gentry, meaning he wasn't a super-rich duke, but he was wealthy enough to have an education and connections. Why do we like Massey for this? Because of a clue hidden in the first poem, Pearl. Remember, medieval writers didn't sign their names on the title page, but they loved puzzles. They often hid their names in anagrams or puns within the text itself. In Pearl, there is a line where the narrator describes the pearl as being masquels, which means spotless or flawless. But in the dialect of the time, masquels sounds suspiciously like Massey. Some scholars believe this is a signature woven into the rhyme scheme, Massiels or Masseys. Furthermore, John Massey had a son who died young. Does this explain the heartbreaking grief in Pearl? It's a compelling theory. He fits the geography, the social class, and potentially the personal tragedy. But there's a problem. We have other poems definitely written by a John Massey, and honestly, they aren't very good. They lack the spark, the fire, the absolute genius of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So unless John Massey had a miraculous burst of talent and then lost it, he might just be a red herring. So let's zoom out. If it was Massey who had the money to pay for this brings us to the royal connection. We tend to think of the West Midlands as the boondocks of medieval England, far from the London court. But in the late 1300s, that wasn't true. The King of England was Richard II. If you know your Shakespeare, you know Richard II as the poetic, tragic king who was eventually overthrown. Richard II was obsessed with the region of Cheshire. He didn't trust the London nobles. He surrounded himself with a private army of archers and bodyguards recruited specifically from Cheshire. He called them his watchmen. He poured money into the region. This changes everything. It means our secret poet didn't have to be a lonely hermit in the woods. He could have been writing for the king's inner circle. Imagine this. The poet is a cleric or a legal official working for one of Richard II's loyal lords in Cheshire, perhaps the Stanley family or the De Vers. He writes Sir Gawain not just as a fun story, but as a subtle warning to the king. Think about the plot of Gawain again. It starts with a young, somewhat reckless King Arthur who demands entertainment. It features a court that is beautiful but perhaps a bit naive, unaware of the dangers lurking outside. This mirrors Richard II's court perfectly. Richard was young. He loved fashion and art, just like the descriptions in the poem, and he was criticized for being too focused on luxury while his enemies gathered at the gates. Is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight actually a mirror held up to the king? Is the Green Knight a symbol of the wild, uncontrollable forces of nature and reality that the king was ignoring? There is another clue in the heraldry. In the poem, Gawain carries a shield with a pentangle, a five-pointed star on the front. The poet spends a bizarre amount of time explaining exactly what this star means: truth, honor, faith. It's a symbol of perfection. But in the end, Gawain fails. He isn't perfect. He flinches. He lies to save his life. This focus on symbols and badges was an obsession of Richard II's court. Richard's personal badge was the white hart, a deer. The poem is filled with deer hunting. The connections are everywhere, like invisible threads tying the poem to the doomed king. But there is one more suspect, a dark horse that some sleuths prefer. His name is John Donne, no, not the famous 17th century poet, an earlier one. He was a professional official in the court of the Duke of Lancaster. He had the legal knowledge, the vocabulary, and the connections. But like Massey, we can't find the smoking gun. We can't find a receipt that says, paid to John Donne, 5 gold coins for one poem about a green giant. The tragedy of this investigation is that we are likely looking at the name of the poet without knowing it. He is probably listed in a dusty ledger somewhere as clerk of the wardrobe or controller of the household. He was a bureaucrat by day, a genius by night. He lived in a world of violence and plague. The Black Death had swept through England only a few decades before, killing half the population. That trauma is in the book too. The fear of death in Gawain is visceral. When the axe comes down, Gawain shrinks a little with his shoulders. That tiny movement, that flinch, is the most human moment in medieval literature. It's the moment the superhero becomes a man. So, we have a profile. We have a list of possible names like Massey and Donne. We have a connection to the tragic court of Richard II, but the crossword clue remains unfilled. The answer isn't Massey. It isn't Donne. The answer to the clue, the secret medieval poet, is usually the Pearl Poet. It's a name we invented because we failed to find his real one. But here is the twist. Maybe his anonymity was intentional. In the next part, we need to talk about why someone would write the greatest story of their age and not sign it. Was it humility? Fear? Or was it something more dangerous? We are going to look at the heresy angle. Because in the 1300s, writing about theology in English instead of Latin could get you burned at the stake. Was our poet hiding to save his life? And we will look at the final, miraculous journey of the manuscript itself. How it went from a dusty shelf in the middle of nowhere to being the crown jewel of British literature, saving J.R.R. Tolkien's career in the process. Yes, the creator of The Lord of the Rings is a key witness in this case. Welcome back to the investigation. We've looked at the suspects, the profile, and the royal court. But now, we have to ask the darker question. Was our secret poet hiding on purpose? In the late 14th century, writing in English wasn't just a stylistic choice. It was a political act, and sometimes a dangerous one. This was the age of the Lollards, a group of religious rebels led by John Wycliffe. They believed that the Bible should be in English, not Latin, so that common people could understand it. The church hated this. They saw it as a threat to their power. If you were caught translating scripture or arguing complex theology in the vulgar tongue of the people, you could be branded a heretic. And heretics didn't just get fined, they got burned. Now look at Pearl again. Our poet is writing about high-level theology, grace, salvation, the nature of heaven, in the dialect of the West Midlands. He is bypassing the Latin-speaking priests and speaking directly to the layman. In the poem, the father learns that he doesn't need to buy masses or pay the church to understand God. He just needs to listen to his daughter's spirit. That is a dangerous idea. It borders on the very heresies that people were being hunted for. Perhaps our poet didn't sign his name because he didn't want the bishop knocking on his door. He wanted the work to survive, not his ego. He chose safety. He chose the mask. But while the poet stayed hidden in the shadows of history, his work almost died in the dark, too. After the fire of 1731, the manuscript Cotton Nero AX sat in the British Museum, now the British Library, largely ignored. The handwriting was so bad and the dialect so weird that most Victorian scholars just glanced at it and moved on. They thought it was uncouth. Enter the witness, J.R.R. Tolkien. Yes, that Tolkien. Before he wrote The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien was a young professor at Oxford, and he was obsessed with this manuscript. In 1925, he co-edited the definitive version of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Tolkien didn't just read the poem, he breathed it. He realized that this anonymous poet was a fairy writer of the highest order. He saw that the poet had captured something ancient and magical about the English countryside that had been lost. In fact, if you look closely, you can see the DNA of the secret poet all over Middle-earth. Think about the Green Knight. He is a giant, nature-bound figure who cannot be killed, who tests the hero's moral character. Does that sound like Tom Bombadil, or perhaps the Ents? Think about the ring. In The Lord of the Rings, the One Ring makes you invisible, but it is also a heavy burden of sin. In Sir Gawain, the hero is given a green girdle, a sash. The lady tells him it will protect him from death. It's a magic talisman. Gawain accepts it because he's scared to die. But later, he wears it as a badge of shame, a reminder that he failed to have faith. Tolkien took the secret poet's central theme, that even the best heroes are flawed, and that the real battle is inside your own head, and he built the greatest fantasy series of all time around it. Without our anonymous poet, Frodo might never have left the Shire. Tolkien fought for this poet. He argued that this anonymous writer was one of the three greatest authors of the English Middle Ages, standing shoulder to shoulder with Chaucer and the author of Piers Plowman. He dragged the secret poet out of the obscurity of the archives and put him back in the spotlight. But even Tolkien couldn't solve the identity. He admitted that the poet's name was lost forever. He called him a man of deep seriousness and humor, a man who loved the landscape of the West Midlands. Tolkien felt a kinship with him, a spiritual connection across 600 years. So where does that leave us? We have a manuscript that survived fire. We have a poet who might have been hiding from the law. We have a literary descendant in J.R.R. Tolkien who carried the torch. But the crossword clue still stares at us. The secret medieval poet. In the final part of our story, we are going to close the case. We are going to look at the last, haunting lines of the poem itself. We are going to talk about the legacy of Anonymous. And I'm going to give you the answer you need to write in those boxes, and the deeper answer that solves the mystery of the man himself. Because in the end, the poet played one last trick on us. He didn't just hide his name. He made us realize that his name doesn't matter. We have sifted through the ashes of the Cotton Library. We have walked the muddy trails of the medieval Wirral. We have whispered the names of knights and clerks in the shadow of Richard II's court. We have seen how J.R.R. Tolkien rescued a ghost from oblivion. So, you are sitting there, pen hovering over the crossword puzzle. The clue is the secret medieval poet. What do you write? The answer, the one that fits the boxes, is the Pearl Poet, or sometimes simply the Gawain Poet. It is a name that is not a name. It is a title we bestowed upon him because his true name was washed away by time. But in a strange way, this anonymity is exactly what he would have wanted. At the very end of the manuscript, after Gawain has returned home in shame, wearing the green sash as a mark of his failure, the poet adds a motto. It is scribbled at the bottom of the page in a different hand, likely added shortly after the poem was written. It reads, Honi soit qui mal pense. This is the motto of the Order of the Garter, the highest order of chivalry in England, founded by Edward III. It means, "Shame be to him who thinks evil of it." Is this the final clue? Was the poet telling us that this story was commissioned for the king's elite knights? Or was he being ironic, mocking the high ideals of a court that was rotting from the inside? We will never know for sure, but that motto connects the poem to the very heart of English history. The secret poet didn't leave us a biography. He didn't leave us a selfie. He left us something better. He left us a mirror. Because he is anonymous, he belongs to everyone. He isn't John Massey of Cotton or John Donne the bureaucrat. He is simply the voice. He is the voice that tells us that it's okay to be afraid. He tells us that perfection is a myth. Gawain tries to be the perfect knight, brave, pious, chaste, and he fails. He flinches when the axe comes down. He lies to save his skin. And when he comes home expecting to be executed for his cowardice, the court laughs. They forgive him. They all wear green sashes to support him. The poet is telling us that our failures don't define us. How we deal with them does. That message survived the burning of the library in 1731. It survived the centuries of neglect when scholars thought the dialect was too ugly to read. It survived to inspire Tolkien to create Frodo and Sam. So, when you fill in Pearl Poet on your crossword grid, don't just think of it as a piece of trivia. Think of it as a memorial to the unknown genius who walked the winter hills of England 600 years ago. He looked at the dark forests and the corrupt courts and decided to write a story about light, truth, and the mercy of a second chance. He is the greatest friend we never met, and his secret remains safe with us. And that is the story of the secret medieval poet. It's a cold case that gave us a masterpiece. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest literary mystery, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell turned on so you don't miss our next adventure into the lost archives of history. And I want to hear from you. Do you think anonymity makes a piece of art better, or does it drive you crazy not knowing who created it? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep reading between the lines. I'll see you in the next one.